Good morning. I'm so glad you could be with me today in our Unfolding the Word studies together. We're in the midst of a study of the book of Daniel. We're now in the 10th chapter of Daniel. Today I want to read again three verses actually, that we began to look at yesterday. The first of these is in verse 13 of Daniel chapter 10. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I was left there with the kings of Persia. And then later on, coming down into verse 20, and then he said, Do you not know why I've come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth, for there are none who contend by my side against these, except Michael, your prince. We've been talking about this reality of the hidden spiritual warfare behind history and behind current events. God, in this portion of Daniel, is giving us a behind-the-scenes look. The curtain is like raised up, and we can see what's going on behind the scenes of history. We were talking about the angelic dimensions to the warfare of the world and the conflicts of the world. The Ephesians 6 idea that it's not flesh and blood alone that we fight against. Now, today I want to pick up on Satan's great intentions in this hidden war, because it's a war that's being alluded to a number of times throughout Daniel, and more than alluded to, specifically stated. But in Daniel, we discover three things that are going on in the enemy of our souls. The first we encountered back in Daniel, the 7th chapter, in verse 25. Let me read that verse to you. He shall speak words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and shall think to change the times and the law. The first of the great intentions of our enemy, and again, that's not the first time I've highlighted it, but I want to highlight it here to pull it together for you, is to seek to change the times, which is a way of talking about the fact of his goal to overthrow and overrule God's plan for history. He wants to thwart God's plan for history. Certainly, back in Daniel, in Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar thought as a human being he could do that, although I think prompted by the enemy as well. And of course, the answer to that was, no, you can't. There is one Lord of history, one who is in charge of the times. Only God is the master of history. And yet Satan, in a twisted, distorted, self-deceived way, believes that somehow he can change that. I was thinking of Daniel chapter 2, verses 20 and 21 in this regard. Daniel answered and said, Blessed be the name of the God forever and ever, to whom belong wisdom and might. He changes the times and the seasons. He removes kings and sets up kings. So the first of these great intentions of the enemy of our souls behind this hidden war, this spiritual warfare, is to try to thwart God's plan of history to change the times. Closely in keeping with that, it also said in this verse in Daniel 7 that I read to you, he shall think to change the times and the law. One of Satan's great intentions is to break the law of God, to try to change it. He wants to overrule what God has revealed about what is right and wrong, what is righteous and unrighteous, what is true and what is false. And he will seek in all kinds of ways to dispute God from Genesis 3 onward, saying, has God really said? And then, of course, disputing what God said. That's his great intention. And that's why he continues in this warfare, believing he can be successful in undercutting the laws of God. Another way of saying that is his goal is to change where people look to find the absolutes of their life. Where do they go to find the truths, the givens? He does not want them turning to God's word, because God's word in its truth clearly demonstrates who Satan is, what this world is about, and where it is going, and what we need to do to become right with the God who is really there. So he works and works and works to get the culture, human beings, to look somewhere other than toward God. Certainly, a big part of that master plan on his part is to undercut the authority of the Bible. We live in a day and age where vastly more people believe the Bible is just human words, not God's word, than believe it's God's word. And the condition is only getting worse. And sadly, much of that is found even within those groups that claim to be under the umbrella of Christianity. Listen, we are involved here in a ministry of unfolding the word because we are convinced that is God's word, that there is no changing of the law, and that there's only one place to turn for truth, and absolutes God's word. Thirdly, what Satan is operating to do, what his goal is in all of his spiritual warfare, is to try to overrule Messiah's coming, to break up the solution God has in motion for the solution to sin and separation. That's why his attacks have been on the Jewish people all along the way, to try, first of all, to disrupt the first coming of the Messiah, and then secondly, to disrupt the second coming of the Messiah. Now, why would Satan think it's possible to disrupt such a plan? Satan, who's been around for all of time, just about, why would he conclude that disruption of God's plan of history as it relates to the Messiah would be possible for him? And I think the answer to that is, first of all, there's a great self-deception within the enemy of our souls, who is also called the master of deceiving others, but he himself is deceived. But I believe partially he's deceived because God, for reasons known only to God, at times seems to give room for Satan to think he's won a victory. He has permitted Satan in different places to obstruct something that God is doing. Now, God's plan in all of that, he ultimately overrules such obstruction. But nonetheless, it happens, and it happens just enough that Satan, in his madness and self-deception, believes he can attack and disrupt, ultimately, the plan of God. And certainly the final 7-year period of the 70 weeks, with the Great Tribulation and the chaos of that time, is his last-ditch effort to disrupt the plan of the Messiah by replacing that plan with the culminating Antichrist. Of course, he doesn't succeed. Well, at any rate, Satan, for lots of different reasons, is carrying out this behind-the-scenes warfare of which we are a part, whether we like it or not. Now, in verse 20, the angel Gabriel says to Daniel that he has to go back into the battle again. He's out of the battle, giving a message to Daniel, and now he's going back to it. Listen again, I'll read it to you. Then he said, "Do you not know why I've come to you? But now I have to return to fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go, behold, the prince of Greece will come." The sharing of this prophetic message related to the Messiah is but a temporary break from what is the normal pattern of life for God's angels, certainly for Gabriel, which is to be in that spiritual battle. Notice he talks about the fact that eventually another prince, and you remember from our studies, that's referring to a fallen angel, another prince will come on the scene, the prince of Greece. And that fallen angel will be fighting against the prince of Persia and overcome it. Now, of course, that links back to all of the other prophecies we looked at, but it adds this additional dimension that of this angelic warfare behind the human elements of the warfare. And by the way, if there was any question as to whether Greece was intended in those previous prophecies, this ought to clear it up for people. There is a fallen angel behind the nations of the world, each nation. Certainly there was a fallen angel behind Alexander the Great. Now, I don't believe human beings, human leaders are aware that there is that spiritual warfare going on behind the scenes. That's one of the things that God is revealing to his people through the word. But that doesn't change the fact that it's going on. They're not aware of it. Of course it's going on. There are angels behind the human actors in this world. And to me, it's interesting. He says, no one contends by my side except Michael, your prince, because I believe the only country or nation that had a non-fallen angel as the behind-the-scenes player was Israel, the people of God, the Jewish people. Some final thoughts on this. Each one of us is on the front lines, even if we don't see the battle with the curtain raised. Don't make the mistake of not thinking it's there. And therefore take the Ephesians 6 seriously as it talks up to the importance of wearing our armor, carrying our sword. Also, accept the fact that we will never make sense out of human events in history only by what we see in the human drama itself. Understand there's a spiritual drama behind it all, an invisible war. And finally, accept that there is a clear victor over time in that war. The outcome of the war is not in question. The timing is what is only partially revealed to you and I. Well, at any rate, join me next time as we continue to look at the future of the Jews during that first 69 of the 70 weeks of the 70-week prophecy. God bless.